Okay, so we're covering chapter 5 today, which is continuing with the flow of food. And we're going to talk today about purchasing and receiving. Again, as we're going through this flow of food, what are the two things that we're going to focus on? Time and temperature. With cross-contamination. Okay, so first thing is we need to be sure that we're purchasing our food from approved reputable suppliers. So these are companies that have been inspected either by a government agency or by a third-party company. There's companies that you can hire to come in and inspect your operation. And then you can, they should be able to present to you as a restaurant owner a copy of their inspection. You have to meet all the local, state, and federal laws. The things in the report should be their own processes for receiving and storage. If they're doing any type of processing, so if they're getting raw ingredients and doing something to them on their property, then it has to have a report that they're doing that correctly. What their shipping processes are. If they have TCS food, they have, it would let you know that they're using refrigerated trailers whenever they ship that product. Their cleaning and sanitizing methods, employee personal hygiene, evidence of staff training, they need to have a recall program in case something is contaminated either in their facility or before they receive it. And then the extent of their HACCP programs or some other type of food safety system. Okay, so some guidelines for you as a restaurant whenever you receive your orders. Set up your appointments. We're receiving appointments for times when you have staff available to receive the orders and inspect it. Ideally, you have enough employees that they can receive the order without interrupting your food preparation or service. But you definitely don't want them coming in the middle of your lunch hour rush when people are busy. The specific people that are receiving have to follow safety procedures. They have to have the authority to sign for, to accept, reject any type of deliveries. And they have to have the knowledge to know what to accept and what to send back. And then as a manager, you have to provide them with the tools that they need for their jobs. So some of those tools are scales so that you can weigh how much product you are receiving. This is a double check. Definitely thermometers so you can check temperatures. They need to have their paperwork, purchase orders. You want to plan ahead for shipments. You should keep a log of all the shipments that you get in. And then again, they need to be inspected immediately when they're delivered. So talked about having different types of thermometers, having a scale that can weigh the product, make sure you're getting the correct amount. If you're receiving food, you need your own paperwork. So this is an example of the Culinary Institute. We have an order coming in here, and we ordered 10 gallons of milk, 3 cases of eggs, 10 pounds of cheese, 50 pounds of shrimp, and 5 cases of canned filled tomatoes. That's our document because that's what we ordered. Whenever the delivery driver comes with their order, they may have made a mistake or a substitution that you won't accept. But it's easier to miss that type of thing if you don't use your original paperwork. So you're going to have to use both. Okay, so the inspection process. First step, look into the delivery truck. Make sure that it's clean and there's no evidence of pests. And when you get the product, inspect the food items, check the counts of what you're receiving. You would do spot checks of weights. You wouldn't necessarily weigh every single item that comes in because you don't have time for that. Check for damage or repackaging, mishandling, any kind of torn cases. Take sample temperatures of all TCS foods. Inspect and store each delivery before accepting another one. Unless you're in a really large operation where you have like 100 people on staff to receive several trucks at the same time. Well, there's an option that you have with a key drop delivery where people delivering your food have a key to your operation and they're going to deliver overnight while no one is at your operation. In order to do that, the opening staff has to know that there was a delivery and they have to inspect it first thing whenever they get into the operation. Deliveries have to meet the following criteria. Of course, they have to be from an approved source. They have to be placed in the correct storage location to maintain the required temperature. So TCS food has to go into the cooler, frozen food has to go into the freezer, your other things can stay out at room temperature. They have to be protected from contamination in storage. So we don't know the order of storing things yet, but you wouldn't want to store lettuce under raw chicken. They cannot be contaminated already. They have to be presented honestly, which means no fake coloring added to them or no covers on them that make them look different than what they actually look like. So from the FDA food code, honestly presented, food shall be offered for human consumption in a way that does not mislead or misinform the consumer. Food colors or additives, colored overwraps, certain lights may not be used to misrepresent the true appearance, color, or quality of food. Sometimes if you go in the grocery store, there will be a wrap over some items and it'll make the meat look like it's bright red, and then you take the wrap off, it's gray. So those kind of things are not allowed. Okay. Whenever it comes time to rejecting items on a shipment, and you might have a shipment that comes in that had just like the 5 items like we showed on the example, or you might have like 100 line items coming in. So you have to have a system for separating the rejected items from your accepted items. And then you've got to communicate with the driver, the delivery person, about what it is that's wrong with the item. Either they sent you too much, they sent you the wrong item, It could be damaged. There's quite a few things that could be wrong. You usually note that on the invoice and get a signed adjustment or credit slip. Typically, they do that right on the invoice. They'll write on like not delivered, wrong item, and cross it out, deduct it from the total. This is a little bit out of order. Log the incident on the invoice. Okay, so after you receive the items, you send your paperwork, the receiving paperwork, to your accounting office so that they can go ahead and pay the bills. And then they will be keeping track of paper inventory, and then you will be responsible for physical inventory. Okay. So in the event of a recall, there might be a recall if food is contaminated or has been exposed to an allergen. So you have to go look through your inventory to determine if you have any of the item that was recalled. If you do, you're going to pull that out of your inventory so that your staff doesn't use it, and store that someplace separate from your regular food inventory. Important to label the item to prevent it from being placed back in inventory. If you set it aside somewhere, somebody might think that it's just there by accident. So you're going to put a label on it. If you can read what's on the screen, it's saying do not use, do not discard. Because we want to hold on to this until we find out what the manufacturer is going to want us to do with that recalled item. Talk to the staff, inform them not to use that product. And then you should be receiving probably electronically, or you might have to go to the manufacturer's website to find their notification and read what it is that you're going to do with that item. You may just have to show your original invoice for purchasing that item, and then they'll reimburse you and tell you just throw it away. Or they might want you to ship it back to them for them to analyze. Okay, so the other thing is we have to take temperatures of CCS food. So just like we're checking cooked food, you want to check this food in the thickest part of the food to get the accurate temperature. Because that, in this case, chicken breast, may have been time temperature abused before it was packed for shipping. And they're packing it on ice, so the exterior of the chicken breast is going to feel cold, but the interior is going to be the last part to actually get down to the required temperature. So if they did something or tried to sneak by something, that's why you're checking for the center temperature. If you have reduced oxygen packaged food, things like your packs of bacon, looks like they've got a couple of containers of ground beef. You don't want to jab a thermometer probe through the packaging. So if you have at least two of them, you can sandwich them together and put the thermometer between them. Some items, you can get milk and liquid eggs that come in plastic bags. They're supported by a cardboard box, but the milk itself or the eggs are contained inside the plastic. So you can move that plastic and just wrap it around your thermometer. Other packaged food, so things like cottage cheese, sour cream, potato salad, if you're buying that pre-made, you need to open up packages and insert the thermometer stem or the probe into that product. So you're going to, again, if you're getting a case of this, open it up, go for one of the center containers, because that's going to be the warmest one, and then check the temperature in there. Okay, so our actual criteria for delivery. In general, cold TCS food has to be received at 41 degrees or lower, but there are some exceptions. You're receiving live shellfish with oysters, mussels, clams, or scallops. They can be received at an air temperature of up to 45 degrees Fahrenheit and an internal temperature no greater than 50 degrees Fahrenheit. But once you receive those, you've got to get them down to below 41 degrees within 4 hours. So you might pack them on ice, put them in the cooler, or maybe just putting them in the cooler is going to be sufficient to get them down to that temperature. Shucked shellfish. So sometimes you can get like gallons of oysters or scallops. That can also be received at 45 degrees or lower. But again, it needs to be cooled down within 4 hours. Milk can be received up to 45 degrees. Shell eggs can be received at an air temperature of 45 degrees. Again, both of those have to be cooled down to 41 degrees or lower. If you are receiving hot TCS food, if somebody else is cooking food for you and delivering it to you, it has to arrive at your facility at least 135 degrees. So it has to be out of the temperature danger zone. Okay, frozen food. Frozen food has to be received frozen solid. You want to reject frozen food if there's evidence of it having thawed and refrozen. So you might see packaging this initial is called IQF, it means individually quick frozen, which is usually how they freeze things like seafood, different berries, and fruits. So they'll freeze them on a conveyor belt, like in 5 seconds as it goes through the glass freezer. And then they can be packaged and they won't stick together. But if somewhere in the transportation system they thaw out and then get refrozen, they're going to be stuck together. So if you find product that's frozen together, that means it was thawed and refrozen. You might also see ice crystals all over it, so that's another sign that it has been thawed and refrozen. Sometimes some items will thaw and they'll release liquid, and then you'll find that liquid frozen at the bottom of the container, and usually all the product is frozen together. And some of that liquid might leak, and so the cardboard might be stained with liquid, and that could be another sign that it has been mishandled. So we want to reject packaged items that have any kind of tears or holes in them. Cans with severe dents in the seam or body, anything with missing labels, because how do you know what it is if it doesn't have a label on it? Swollen or bulging ends, any type of holes, leaks, or rust on the cans. The reduced oxygen packaged food, if you see that like it's starting to expand, if there's like air forming in it, that's an indication of bacterial growth, because the bacteria are going to release gases, and it's going to cause that what should be a cryovac seal. It's going to create an air pocket in there. There should not be air in there. And any other type of broken cartons or seals like you get on like a gallon of milk. There's a little safety seal on there. So you want to check that those are intact. Okay, so other things to reject: dirty, discolored packaging, anything that is leaking or shows signs of having been leaked on, or water stains, any signs of pests or pest damage, which could be like dead insects. It could be tears or holes chewed by rodents. Any kind of sign of tampering that somebody may have opened and closed, maybe tampered with the food. Missing or incorrect labels, and of course, expired, used by, or expiration dates. So there's some other documentation when you buy certain items. Any type of shellfish that you buy is alive. It has to be received with shell stock identification tag. So if you're buying like a sack of crawfish or oysters, you're going to, on that sack, have an identification tag. It indicates where and when that product was harvested. You need to keep the shellfish in that sack. Do not remove the shell stock tag until the last of that batch is sold. Usually that goes pretty quickly. Write the date the last shellfish was used on that shell stock tag, and then keep that in your operation for at least 90 days. Fish that will be eaten raw or partially cooked, from sushi or sashimi. You should be receiving documentation from the supplier that shows that that fish has been correctly frozen before being received. And there's a freezing process that will kill parasites, because that's the biggest danger from eating raw fish. And just like the live shellfish, you need to keep that documentation for 90 days after the sale of that fish. Farm-raised fish, the supplier has to provide documentation that it was raised to FDA standards, and again, keep those documents for 90 days from the sale of the fish. Some products require inspection stamps. So meat, poultry, and eggs are inspected by the USDA. So carcass, the carcass, but if you've seen the in movies or pictures with the room where the cows are hanging off of the racks in the warehouse, they're stamped with like a blue stamp that says USDA inspected. But when those things get cut down, not every large piece is going to have that stamp on it. So then the packaging will have to have that stamp on it. And if you go to a grocery store, you should see one of these stamps on your meat and poultry products, as well as on any type of carton of eggs. Grading stamps are voluntary, and those are paid for by processors and packers. So if it's the grading on beef could be choice or prime, that's not up to the government, it's up to the processors to do that. Okay, so how do you tell whether food should be accepted or rejected based on its quality? Look for things like mold. The cheese on the right there has a lot of mold growing on it. Should never receive that. Fresh meat, fish, or poultry, if it's slimy or sticky or dry, or if it has soft flesh that leaves an imprint whenever you touch it, that means that it's been around for a while and it's probably not good to serve. So you don't want to receive that. Fresh fish will also have, their eyes will be full and bright colored. The older that they get, they lose liquid out of the eyes and they start to sink in and they get a kind of a dull color to them. Also, the odor, reject any food with an abnormal or unpleasant odor. So here we go. Fresh fish should have bright red gills, bright shiny skin, firm flesh that springs back when it's touched. They have a mild ocean or seaweed smell, bright, clear, full eyes. If it's whole fish, it should be surrounded by crushed, self-draining ice. The self-draining ice just means that you have a perforated container that the fish and the ice is in, and then another container below it to catch the melting ice. Okay, so rejecting criteria: dull gray gills and dull dry skin, soft flesh that leaves an imprint when touched. If you would touch that fish on the right, your finger would probably like go into it and just leave a hole. Any type of a strong fishy or ammonia smell is bad. Cloudy, red-rimmed, sunken eyes. Tumors, abscesses, or cysts on the skin to indicate that fish itself had some type of disease. Shellfish, again, it should have a mild ocean or seaweed aroma. Shells should be closed for live shellfish. It should be unbroken. If fresh, they have to be received alive. So the way to check that is if you have a shell that's partially open, just tap it and it should close if it's still alive. If it doesn't, it's not alive anymore. Reject them if they're slimy, sticky, or dry, have a really strong fishy smell. You see things like this where they're broken or have a lot of mud on them, and then dead on arrival. You would want to reject those. Live crustaceans, again, should have that mild ocean or seaweed smell. Shipped alive, packed in seaweed. Alternately, you might find them packed in wet newspapers and kept moist. Again, you're going to reject anything that has strong fishy smell or that's not alive. For meat, you're looking for a bright cherry red. Your aged beef may be darker. Vacuum packed beef will appear a little bit purple. Lamb should be light red. Pork should be light pink. Meat with firm white fat. So the older that the product gets, the softer the fat is going to get, and the softer the flesh is going to get. So reject beef that is brown or green. Green is a sign of spoilage. Reject lamb that is brown or a whiter surface covering the lean part of the meat, or pork that is excessively dark, soft, or rancid fat. Rancid is something you would have to smell, and rancid is just whenever fat of any type spoils. The flesh for your meat should be firm and spring back, shouldn't have an odor. Packaging is intact and clean. So we would reject anything that's, again, slimy, sticky, or dry, sour odors, broken cartons, dirty wrappers, torn packaging, or broken seals. For poultry, again, there should be no discoloration. Should have firm flesh springing back when touched. There shouldn't be an odor. And fresh poultry should be surrounded by crushed, self-draining ice. Rejecting criteria: if you see a discoloration of purple or green, that's not the natural color. Dark chicken. Dark wingtips, although red wingtips are acceptable. stickiness under the wings and around the joints, or an abnormal or unpleasant odor. Those are all reasons to reject your chicken. Eggs should not have an odor. They should be clean and the shell should be unbroken. These are probably one of the harder things to check, although like they come in cardboard cases and in their flats. So there might be 15 dozen in a case, or in a double case, there'd be 30 dozen. It would take a lot of time to open up everything. But if somebody did something like dropped the case and eggs, especially at the bottom, broke, you're going to see the liquid stains on the cardboard. So you want to root to something like that. Or if you open up the case and you see this on the top, dirty or cracked shells, sulfur smell, or an off odor, you would want to reject those. Dairy products, milk should smell a little bit sweet. Butter should have a sweet flavor and a uniform color, firm texture, indicating the color would indicate whether it had been like held at a really warm temperature and started to melt and then was cooled after that. Cheese should have its own typical flavor depending on what type of cheese it is, and texture. Most of them have a uniform color. They should have a clean and unbroken rind around them. So if you have milk that comes in that's sour, bitter, or tastes moldy, off odor, expired sell-by date, then you want to reject that. Same thing with butter that tastes sour, bitter, or moldy. Or if it's really soft, contains foreign matter, it may have been contaminated with something. Cheese that has abnormal flavor or texture. So if you open up like a can of cottage cheese and it's like it's solid and dry, that would be a reason to refuse it. Unnatural mold. Of course, blue cheeses have mold in them. There's some other cheeses that have mold as a natural part of the product, but like cheddar cheese shouldn't have mold, or any of the typical cheeses that we get at the grocery store. Fresh produce. The exception criteria: temperature varies according to the product, and you have to be careful with fruits and especially leafy greens. If they get too cold, they're going to freeze, and then they're going to become very mushy. So you wouldn't be able to use those. The condition of accepting the fresh fruit depends also on the product. So typically things that like apples and oranges that come in cases, they're pretty uniform quality. You don't have that much of an issue with that. Berries are much more likely to be moldy. And if you get several flats of them, you want to make sure you look down and at least get an inspection, quick inspection of the flats. Because things like this, the moldy berries, they're going to try to hide, and you're paying a lot of money for these things, and there's nothing you can do with berries that have mold on them. I haven't found insects or insect eggs in berries, but damaged or moldy, yeah, I find that kind of thing fairly often. Okay, so that is chapter 4. With any questions about anything so far? I'm sorry, that was 5, wasn't it? Yes, let's go through. Okay. Okay, so make sure you're keeping up with the quizzes. Let me know if you have any questions about the quiz setup or anything else in the class, and we'll see you on Friday.